origins everywhere, and more on the young Earth dating methods. This is Genesis Week. And welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary and analysis on news, views, and events pertaining to the Origins controversy. Made possible by you, the supporters of CORE Ottawa, Citizens for Origins Research and Education. Excellence in pirate broadcasting, we continue to bring you the information the anti-creationists don't want you to see or hear, and we give glory to our creator while we do it. Remember, if you get lost in cyberspace, you can just punch in genesisweek.com, where you can find us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and get extras like Crevo rants and full interviews with our guests. I'm your host, Ian Juby. If you'll recall from 2 years ago from the Ken Ham Bill Nye debate, Nye made a comment in passing. If there had been a global flood, we should expect to see Grand Canyons on every continent. On this point, he was completely correct. He was arguing that there wasn't Grand Canyons on every continent, therefore there must not have been a worldwide flood. He may be Bill Nye the science guy, but he is definitely not Bill Nye the geography and geology guy. As I pointed out on the special Genesis Week Ham on Nye episode, there are Grand Canyons on every continent. In fact, Grand Canyon is one of the smaller canyons. Mr. Nye is also apparently blissfully unaware that Grand Canyon, and indeed all of the larger canyons, provide a secondary, powerful, and compelling evidence for Noah's flood. They are all water gaps. Now, what is a water gap? When you go to Grand Canyon, you will be given the standard speech that over many millions of years, the mighty Colorado River carved this grandest of canyons. But there's a huge problem with this just so story. The geologists are well aware that for a variety of reasons, the giant dome mountain that Grand Canyon cut through had to have risen first, and then the canyon was cut. The river would have had to have flowed uphill for several thousand feet to start cutting the canyon, when the river could have gone around the dome. Now, obviously, this is impossible. And this is what we call a water gap, a canyon which cuts through a mountain when the water could have gone around the mountain. Grand Canyon is only one of hundreds of water gaps around the world, and they are a mystery to advocates of deep time, who are bound to their anti-scientific stance of disallowing a worldwide flood. It is anti-science to rule out possible causes before you even embark on your study to find out possible causes of the geology you're trying to figure out. It also invariably leads to foolishness because they've rejected the real reason Grand Canyon was formed, a worldwide flood. The water started above the mountain and thus cut through the mountain. But Grand Canyon is only one water gap and the smaller of canyons we find around the world. In North America alone, both Hell's Canyon and Copper Canyon are longer and deeper than Grand Canyon. In South America, the Rio Marañón Canyon is half again longer than Grand Canyon, and up to 9,000 meters, or twice as deep as Grand Canyon. Buried under the ice in Greenland is what has been dubbed Greenland's Grand Canyon, first reported in 2013 and described as a mega canyon. Not as deep as Grand Canyon, it's still quite impressive at some 800 meters or 2,600 feet deep. And at over 750 kilometers or 460 miles long, it's almost twice as long as Grand Canyon. The Blyde River Canyon in South Africa is comparable in depth to Grand Canyon at about up to 4,500 feet or 1,400 meters deep. The record holder which may be challenged by the Greenland Canyon, is the Tsangpo Canyon in Tibet, China. At 800 kilometers or 500 miles long, it averages 5,000 meters or 16,000 feet deep, almost 3 times the depth of Grand Canyon. At one point, that canyon is 19,714 feet or 6,009 meters deep. Back in 2013, we first heard reports of a massive canyon underneath the ice sheets of western Antarctica. A canyon up to 15.5 miles wide, wider than Grand Canyon and deeper, up to 1.9 miles deep. Now, this past week, another canyon has been found under the Antarctic ice sheet, this time in East Antarctica. Now, while direct measurements still need to be taken, it appears this canyon is about the same depth as Grand Canyon, but more than twice its length, and may also be challenging the Tsangpo Canyon as the record holder for length. The writers of this most recent paper in geology had commented in a press release that we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the surface of Antarctica, hiding underneath the ice sheet. Now, you would think we would not still be discovering massive canyons on Earth. Several of these reports have been made in the past 3 years. The entire globe is covered in massive canyons, each one of them a testament to the global flood of Noah's day, and each one presenting insurmountable problems to the deep time theories of slow and gradual erosion. It all makes complete sense within the context of a worldwide flood. As the continents and mountains rose out of the floodwaters, and the floodwaters receded from off the land, the water carved these massive and magnificent canyons, which we now find literally all over the world. That flood was a judgment against mankind for their wickedness, and Jesus used Noah's flood as an analogy for the judgment to come, the Great White Throne Judgment. The judgment where you and I and everyone will give an account for their time here on earth. The people of earth were warned for 120 years that the flood was coming, and they didn't listen. They paid the consequences dearly. The second judgment is coming, and Jesus warned us to escape that judgment, you must be born again. It's that time of year again. We celebrate Darwin's birth by questioning everything he said. After all, that's what good science does, doesn't it? On the Question Evolution Day Project website, you'll find resources to help you on that great day. Throw a birthday party and have your guests take turns asking a question, or send a birthday card to your favorite evolutionist with a question regarding evolution written inside. Write a letter to the editor of your local paper, questioning evolution. Stir the pot and get people to think. Share what you did on Facebook, tag the Question Evolution Project, let everyone know what you did in trying to get people to conduct good scientific investigation and ask serious, hard-hitting questions about the evolution myth. All right, we'll be back in just 1 minute.
Now, in its second edition, Chronicles of Dinosauria is a beautiful coffee table reader that is sure to provoke fascinating discussions amongst all ages. Chronicles of Dinosauria takes the reader from creation to modern times from the perspective of the great reptiles and presents compelling evidence that dinosaurs and man lived together, just like the Bible says. In scrapbook style, author David Wetzel presents the biblical, historical, and fossil evidence with photos and beautiful drawings by artist Richard Dobbs. See evidence that humans are found in the fossil record right back to the time of the dinosaurs. The book culminates with fresh research into modern-day reports of dinosaurs living in remote areas like Papua New Guinea and the rainforests of Cameroon. You can get your own beautiful hardcover copy for only $16.99 plus shipping by going to GenesisPark.com or from any of the major online booksellers.
Woohoo! Mail for me? the last show, you'll recall that YouTuber Bill Ludlow asked us to provide one example of a dating method that gives an age of the Earth less than 10,000 years. I actually had 3 I was going to share, but had to cut one out in post-production due to time. I pointed to radio halos in coal and the helium diffusion dating methods. Bill Ludlow responded, "Radio halos are not a dating method used to determine the age of the Earth, Ian. As far as the RATE team's helium diffusion testing, can you tell me where the sample was collected and how it was cared for before testing? Also, has their experiment been repeated, and have they gotten the same results from samples taken from other locations? I'm sure you realize that confirming the validity of a test and its ability to be repeatable are crucial to making a scientific claim. Let's look at the results of another study entitled Helium Diffusion and Uranium-Thorium Helium Thermochronometry of Zircon. Initial results from Fish Canyon Tuff and Gold Butte. Quote, helium ages from a variety of settings provide evidence of the applicability and potential value of this new technique. However, important questions remain regarding the behavior of the helium diffusion from apatite, justifying this detailed laboratory study, end quote. They took extreme care in handling and preparing the samples as outlined in the paper, and the samples were submitted independently to 2 different labs for testing. In both cases, the results confirmed the already accepted age, which was of course exceeding tens of millions of years. Why do you believe that tests done by these scientists exceed the RATE testing results by over 4,000 times? Why is it no one else has ever gotten an age of 6,000 years using the same method? Thanks in advance. Looking forward to your response." Thanks for writing it, Bill, and I especially appreciated his comment as Mr. Ludlow obviously thought this through and didn't just regurgitate the nonsense arguments parroted on the internet that were refuted long ago. Now, first of all, in the case of radio halos in coal, yes, those radio halos are a dating method. Here's why. Now, for the sake of viewers who are just tuning into the conversation, in the last show I mentioned the work of Dr. Robert Gentry back in 1977. Gentry had discovered spheres of radiation damage in coal samples. Cutting the spheres in half so you can see the cross section, they look like this and are called radio halos. In the case of the coal, a radioactive element, uranium, got soaked up by the wood in a watery catastrophe. As the uranium gave off radiation, it formed these radio halos. The wood then got compressed by tectonics and turned into coal. The radio halos formed up to that point were compressed as well, but the uranium continued to give off radiation, producing a new uncompressed radio halo. We know how long it takes uranium to make this halo, so we can date the event that compressed the wood into coal. Without the radio halos, we could not use the uranium decay rates to time the compression event. So yes, radio halos in this case are a dating method. And in this particular case, coal from the Eocene, Jurassic, and Triassic eras are supposed to represent 37 to 245 million years ago, an alleged time span of 208 million years in the evolutionary timescale. But there's only been a few thousand years of radioactivity since the compression event of all of these layers. So that demonstrated that these millions of evolutionary years do not exist. They all underwent the same compression event only a few thousand years ago. Now that's 1/3 of the Phanerozoic timescale. If that time was all compressed into one event only a few thousand years ago, I think you would have to agree that the entire history of deep time has been flatly compressed into less than 10,000 years. With regards to the helium diffusion dating in zircons, again, let me please take a moment to explain to the new viewers what the deal is. This was also a discovery first pointed out by Dr. Gentry back in the 70s, and the RATE team explored this discovery further to see if they could actually use it to date rocks. Zircons are a small crystal found in the basement rocks of Earth. Uranium trapped inside the crystals breaks down radioactively and becomes lead. For every uranium atom that turns into a lead atom, 8 helium atoms are given off. So it's like there's a little helium generator inside the crystal. But the helium atom is so small that when you have a helium balloon, you need to put a paste inside the balloon, which we so affectionately refer to as balloon snot. This is because the helium atom is so small that the atoms literally leak right through the plastic or latex of the balloon. So obviously the zircon crystals are going to have a hard time containing the helium produced within them. But these crystals sampled were taken from granite basement rock alleged to be 2 billion, with a capital B, evolutionary years old. There should be very little helium within them because the helium leaks out just as fast as it's produced. What Gentry noticed back in the 70s was that there was a lot of helium still in the crystals. So the RATE team made 2 predictions for how slow the helium needs to leak out if the rock is actually 2 billion years old, in order to obtain the observed amounts of helium that they found in the crystals. They also made a second prediction on how fast the helium would leak out if the rocks were, in fact, only about 6,000 years old. The rate at which helium leaks out is called the helium diffusion rate. Now, graphing these out, notice that the young Earth rate is about 100,000 times faster than the old Earth rate, a very large discrepancy. They then sent zircon crystals to the lab and actually measured the leakage rates, which wound up squarely on the predicted 6,000-year-old rock diffusion rates. Interestingly, one of the authors of the paper that Ludlow cited was the very researcher who conducted the helium diffusion lab work for the RATE project. Kenneth Farley is a world-class expert on helium diffusion. Notice that while they have zircon in the title of the paper, they were not dating the zircons, but rather they were dating the apatite, a type of rock which is considerably softer than zircons and consequently requires much more care than zircons do. Now, as to how the RATE team collected the zircons, you can read the details of this in the RATE books, both of which are available for free download. Further to this, the dating technique that Reiners et al. Used in that research project was radically different than the RATE project. They used thermochronometry, whereas the RATE team used helium leakage rates, diffusion rates. Thermochronometry measures the present rate of helium production in the rock, which of course is very slow right now. They then take how much helium is in the rock and divide that amount by the present rate of production to get an estimate as to when the rock last cooled down enough to be able to retain helium. The rate dating method counted the total amount of radioactive decay that had gone on over the life of the crystal by actually counting the lead atoms within the crystal. They then measured the amount of helium within the crystal to determine how much helium was lost over that time. They then divide that amount by the rate at which it is presently leaking out to obtain an age of the crystal. Interestingly, the reason Reiner and team got the very high ages they did was because of the high amounts of helium within the rocks. This verifies what Gentry, countless other researchers over the past decades, as well as the RATE team, have all said. There's a lot of helium in those rocks. One of the significant finds of the RATE project was that evidently radioactive decay rates in the past were faster than they are today. Because the thermochronometry method relies on the radioactive decay rates always being the same as they are today, the actual date they will get will be skewed. The helium diffusion method, however, works whether or not the radioactive decay rate is the same. That is precisely one of the reasons the RATE team conducted that particular line of research. You can read more about the method and the response to the attempted critiques here. Interestingly, when Bill posted his comment on various Facebook creation evolution pages, a long string of snide responses were posted in response, criticizing me for all kinds of alleged failures and lying, and pointing to a video on YouTube criticizing me for comments I made on this show about some preserved dinosaur skin found here in Canada. That's right, because as we all know, the best way to give yourself credibility and discredit that Juby guy is to quote delusional nutjobs on YouTube. Especially when it's a delusional nutjob who clearly has no clue what he is talking about. The childish accusations hurled against me had to do with some amazing preserved dinosaur skin found in Alberta a few years back. This was another stunning example of preserved dinosaur tissues in the fossil record. But because they used the term a fossil in the article, the delusional YouTube nutjobs said I was lying. Now, I try to keep everything simple here on Genesis Week. I endeavor to make really technical subjects easy to grasp for the layman. I set the goal that most museums and popular science magazines and shows set, and I aim all content for about a grade 8 level. Now, to me, that's the sign of a good teacher, is someone who can explain complicated subject matters in simple terms. So I'll try to make this as simple as possible. We have these things called computers, and you can connect them together so they can communicate with each other. We call this a network. We can connect one network to another network on the other side of town, or in another city. There's this large interconnected network, so I can connect to computers in other countries now. They call this network the internets. I can connect to any computer in that internets, and one of those computers is called youtube.com. If you go there, there's this box up top. This is called a search engine. You can look up Genesis Week Dinosaur Skin and find the episode I made 2 years ago, where I showed that the delusional YouTube nutjobs clearly haven't got a clue what they're even talking about. It's obvious they have never even seen fossil dinosaur skin. I know this because I have seen and studied multiple pieces of dinosaur skin over the years. So what I say here is basically a repeat of what I said 2 years ago, because apparently you skeptics don't know how to use YouTube. First of all, of course they called it a fossil. What else did you expect them to call it? If it's considered to be very old, then it is simply called a fossil, whether it is fossilized or not. For example, the Beresovka mammoth, found in the frozen tundras of Siberia, was so well preserved that its last mouthful of food was identifiable in its mouth and stomach. The hair and flesh was all still there, yet it is called a fossil. The fossil trees of the Axel Heiberg Island in the Canadian High Arctic can be cut with a handsaw and burned. I have pieces of this wood in my museum. It is wood, yet it is called fossil wood. Notice what Philip Curie, former curator of the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller and the past president of the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, had to say about fossils in Alaska. A more spectacular example was found on the north slope of Alaska, where many thousands of bones lack any significant degree of permineralization. The bones look and feel like old cow bones, and the discoveries of the site did not report it for 20 years because they assumed they were bison, not dinosaur, bones. So obviously the term fossil is a loose term indeed. So what exactly is the present fossil dinosaur skin then? The clues as to what exactly the researchers found come from the article itself. They're trying to figure out how the allegedly 70 million year old fossil stayed intact. Well, if the fossil was a rock, they wouldn't be asking that question now, would they? Do you realize how many fossils made of rock there is on planet Earth? Billions upon billions. Nobody is asking how those rocks stayed preserved for millions of years. However, if the dinosaur skin was, in fact, skin, then yeah, they should be asking how on earth skin remained intact for 70 million years. The answer is obvious and simple. It can't. So therefore, we can safely conclude that this dinosaur skin is not 70 million years old. Notice what they said in the article about the dinosaur skin. We have no real idea what the skin looks like. Is it green, blue, orange? There has been research that proved the color of some dinosaur feathers, but never skin. Skin has fat and lots of dead cells along with many inorganic compounds. And, most importantly, quote, Barbie said this is only the third three-dimensional dinosaur skin specimen ever found worldwide, end quote. Now, wait a minute. I've had the privilege of studying three-dimensional dinosaur skin. Now, while it is quite rare, there's a lot more than 3 examples that have been found. Just in the creationary community alone, Creation Evidence Museum has a piece in its collection. And the Glendive Dinosaur and Fossil Museum found a hadrosaur with 3-dimensionally preserved fossil skin on their dig site. Visit the Tucson Fossil and Mineral Show. There's been lots of fossilized dinosaur skin. Obviously, Barbie is not talking about 3-dimensionally preserved stone dinosaur skin, because there's a lot more than 3 examples around. He's talking about something very special, mummified skin. Now, presumably permineralized, which just means it's coated and permeated by rock. But the skin is obviously still there, or else they wouldn't be saying what they are. Obviously, the internet critics have never even seen dinosaur skin in their entire life, and thus know absolutely nothing about the subject matter. So if you try to mock me by using the comments of an ignoramus, really what you're shouting to the world is, hey, look at me, I don't know what I'm talking about either. Look, it's okay to be ignorant on the subject. I don't expect you to be omniscient. I do, however, expect you to educate yourself before you attempt to mock me about something of which clearly you know nothing about. And I do know something about, having conducted first-hand research in that specific area. All right, I'm out of time. I'm your host, Ian Juby, signing off for now. Thank you for joining me. I hope you'll join me again next Genesis Week. Remember, you can send in your comments, questions, hate mail, and the keys to your 2016 Bombardier Skidoo to us in a number of ways. Remember those words of warning and comfort from our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. We'll see you on the flip side.
We are a viewer-supported program and need your support to keep this program on the air. Please pray for us, and if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, K2K 2P4. While we cannot offer tax-deductible receipts outside of Canada, donors wishing to financially support the program can do so online at ianjuby.org/donations, and thank you for your support.